exit of the Black Stars from the ongoing Afghan games in Parliament about the E-levy, and the despondent citizens concerned about the economy. Thankfully, some of the market watchers have corrected some inaccurate representation on the strength of our economy. That opening in the cloud confirms our confidence in a strategy ahead for the future. 2022 promises to be an exciting and eventful year for our country as we seek to build on our collective successes and promote stability and equal opportunities for all of us. Let us as a nation gird our loins as trees of righteousness, and the Lord will guide us to also bring the wealth of nations to ensure prosperity for all of us. For us as a government and the Ministry of Finance, we remain unwavering in our commitment to build a sustainable entrepreneurial nation and growth inclusive strategy of social justice and social mobility, to promote investments, manage a sustainable debt program, build our infrastructure, especially roads, and create jobs for our youth. We, guided by the President, went ahead of most nations in initiating a transformation program in the heat of the pandemic. This is the Ghana Cares program, or Batampa program. This year, we have set out our plan in the 2022 budget to implement a coherent and comprehensive strategy that delivers extended opportunities for all Ghanaians through 4 distinct and essential components: increased resource mobilization, prudent expenditure management to ensure fiscal consolidation, job creation through industrialization, agriculture, and a regional hub strategy on the back of AFCFTA. And as you know, the Youth Start program to ensure skills training and access to capital for our youth. These 4 policy focus areas taken together go to the heart of accelerating our efforts at fiscal consolidation, promoting growth, and strengthening our medium-term prospects and debt sustainability in tackling the behemoth of unemployment, especially among our youth. Last year, together we made a lot of progress in our recovery effort after the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our economy. Our GDP grew at a provisional 5.2% in the first 3 quarters of 21. In fact, it was over 6% in the 3rd quarter of last year. And we continue to focus on improving the lives of our people. This compares to IMF estimates of 3.7% for Sub-Saharan Africa and 3.6% for ECOWAS. Growth, as you know, is a leading indicator of where the transformation will come from and its effect on the economy. At the end of 2021, we had exceeded our domestic tax revenue target for 2021 by 0.5%, according to the GRA, and are well on course to exceed our GDP growth of 5% for 2021 as well. Sustained financing for government flagship programs continue, resulting in some 1.26 million people benefiting from free HSS, 3.45 million pupils covered by school feeding, 100,000 young persons employed under NAPCO, 344,000 households being given a lifeline under the LEAP program, amongst others, and continue to be funded. Ladies and gentlemen, the rapid post-pandemic rebound is as a result of the economic turnaround program and the solid foundation we built between 2017 and 2019, marked by an annual average of 7% economic growth rate between 2017 and 2019, from the 3.4% inherited in 2016, containing the fiscal deficit below 5% of GDP for 3 consecutive years, restructuring the banking sector by spending over $21.6 billion to protect the savings of 4.6 million depositors and 81,700 investors, reducing inflation rate from 15.4% December 2016 to 7.6%, estimated at 12.2% in November 2021, which is attributable to pressures on global supply chain due to the COVID pandemic. However, by end April 2020, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic disrupted our progress. The cost of saving the lives and livelihoods of Ghanaians during the pandemic has been enormous, with revenues drastically reduced by 13.4 billion and unplanned COVID-related expenditures rising by 11.8 billion. Public finances were naturally stretched. In fact, our management of the COVID-19 pandemic has received worldwide acclaim, and these expenditures may account for the relatively low mortality rates, total deaths in Ghana of some 1,350, unfortunately, out of the 235,000 2010 for Africa as of yesterday, 18th January. We had to mobilize additional resources, which included borrowing. This compounded our already stretched finances from having had to undertake the financial sector cleanup, payments to IPP fuel suppliers, energy sector state-owned enterprises of some 26.4 billion as of November 2021. To mitigate the impact of the COVID pandemic, government immediately at that time recruited over 24,000 health professionals, provided some 3.6 million reusable face masks, 50,000 medical scrubs, 90,000 hospital gowns. We rolled out the 750 million CAP bus program in May 2020 to directly support micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to over 302,000 micro, small, medium enterprises, and to create and save some 768,000 jobs. We provided cooked meals to some 2.7 million vulnerable persons and worked with faith-based organizations to distribute dry food packages to 470,000 families. Supported households, all of us, about 4.8 million of us, with water, and 10.2 million urban dwellers alone, subsidies for all Ghanaians. We spent 1.9 billion to ensure that our children and teaching staff at all levels return to school safely and save the year for them as we were able to sit for their BEC and WACC exams with historic results. We did all these while still protecting and paying for the flagship programs, including free SHS, NAPCO, nurses and teacher training allowances, 1D, 1F, planting for food and jobs, road infrastructure, and railroad development, amongst others. We will continue 2022 and beyond with our recovery efforts from this pandemic, with a growth target of 5.3% anchored around our 100 billion Ghana Cares Obatampa program. We remain unwavering in our commitment to ensure that the standard of living of our citizens improve. This year, we have outlined in the 2022 budget our plan and strategy to deliver opportunities for all Ghanaians in creating an entrepreneurial nation. The 2022 budget enables us to stabilize the economy and address the greatest challenges of our time, that is the triple helix of debt, digital and physical infrastructure deficit, especially roads, and unemployment. Indeed, the indignity of our youth sitting at home unemployed must be eradicated. Youth unemployment is not a statistic, it's the real lives of Ghanaians like you and I, and no one should hide his or her head in the sand about this. Ladies and gentlemen, with that background, let me share with you why we need the E-levy, which is one of the key tax measures of our 2022 budget. and why it is important to our lives as Ghanaians in achieving our aim of moving beyond aid. Our revenue to GDP ratio has languished between 11.3% in 2016 to 12.5% in 2021, compared to 16% to 20% of our neighbors. Also, our VAT penetration revenue at 11% to 13%, compared to 18 to 44% of our peers. Clearly, this is an unsustainable way to anchor the extensive transformation agenda articulated in our Ghana Cares Over Tampa program. This is further compounded by the fact that out of the total population of 30.8 million, only about 2.4 million people pay personal income taxes. The question is, what is the most efficient way to bring all Ghanaians into the tax net to build a Ghana beyond aid that we and our children and grandchildren will be proud of? The most efficient way must take into consideration technology and the structural changes in the tax handles. The fact that we have over 40.5 million mobile subscribers and over 17.1 million active mobile money subscribers, it is instructive to note that the total value of transactions on mobile money grew by a compounded average growth rate of 65% between 2016 and 2021, rising from 78.5 billion in 2016 to an estimated 953.2 billion in 2021. Over the past few months, I have made several references to burden sharing. Essentially, we are at a stage in our national development where we must all play our part and put our shoulders to the wheel. Where Greater Accra is responsible for 90% of revenues, it's not the way to burden share. Where some 60,000 professionals, accountants, doctors, lawyers, business people do not pay any direct taxes, it's not the way to go. Where property taxes are laughable, it's not the way to go. Where the wealthy talk about regressive taxes to detract from their own non-payment, it's not the way to go. We simply cannot build forward better with a system where everyone takes and most do not give back. The two major sources of income to pay for expenditure for any government are taxes and borrowing. The balance will tilt one way or the other, depending on the capacity to mobilize revenues. The ability to close loopholes and the willingness for all citizens to be protectors of the public purse and our capacity to prosecute offenders becomes paramount. Unfortunately, we have paid the price for low resource mobilization through insufficient investment. The public sentiment out there is clear. Ghana must collect its taxes to avoid debt accumulation, build our roads, and get our youth to work. So we must collect, we must pay, we must account for it, we must discourage our neighbors from evading taxes, and we must burden share. If we are to do so and still achieve our ambitious, if we do so, we'll achieve our ambitious targets towards rapid development, to expand the economy, to create jobs and prosperity for all. Then the project of burden sharing for shared prosperity must be embraced by all. The consequences relative to our peers: we have invested less in infrastructure. Between 1961 to 2020, Ghana's average gross fixed capital formation ratio was 17%, compared to 25% in sub-Saharan Africa. Moreover, between 2017 and now, our tax to GDP has hovered between 11 to 13%, compared to our peers who were between 16 and 20%. We are paying the price for low resource mobilization through insufficient capital investment. As such, We've had to borrow more than others to finance some of the investment in infrastructure and the provision of social services and security. Our current expenditure pattern is motivated by unwavering support to the sovereign rights of our people, to social justice and social mobility. Between 2017 and 2021, key expenditures have been as follows: education, approximately 50 billion, health, approximately 20 billion, security, approximately 20 billion, other flagships, about 15 billion, and of course, our Agenda 111. In 2016, compensation, interest payments, and statutory funds comprise 141.3% of tax revenues. As at the end of 2021, we estimate that this stood at 146.5% of tax revenues. This reflects the constraints on government's ability to embark on major transformation projects without resorting to borrowing. However, this government, which is a center-right government, has amply demonstrated our commitment to responsible custodianship of resources and the sovereign rights of its citizens. Pre-pandemic, the fiscal deficit declined from 6.5% in 2016 to 4.8% by 2019. Last year, we set a target of 9.4% deficit. As at end November, we were virtually on target. The significance of this must not be lost on us. It means that the finances of our country is not being managed in a rudderless way. It means there's deliberateness, there's care, there's compassion in doing this. It means there's accountability. It means the economy is being managed. This is the true story that we have to tell. Will we go through difficulties? Of course we will. But honestly, show me any government that has done more for social welfare than we have done in this 5 years. We are also on target to exceed our GDP growth target of 4.4% for 2021 based on third quarter statistics, and our domestic revenue target of 57.3 billion for 2021. Our comprehensive agenda to increase mobilization while reducing fiscal slippages is on course through race. Ladies and gentlemen, the E-levy is a necessary tool to increase our tax to GDP from circa 11 to 13% to 16% and above to guarantee that we'll pay for what we use. The E-levy will not only ensure that we move towards a more sustainable debt level, but will also ensure that we have the revenues to sustainably invest in entrepreneurship, youth employment, cybersecurity, digital and road infrastructure. The E-levy also provides a means for all Ghanaians to help support their country and grow this economy as compliant citizens, given to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Undeniably, digitalization is eroding the traditional resilience of brick-and-mortar enterprises, with fewer transactions happening across the country. There's an increased risk that some of the standard revenue generation and tax measures will gradually become obsolete. Indeed, except for excise duties, the various tax types experienced a marked decline in growth between 2019 and 2020. VAT, for instance, which has traditionally been a significant component of Ghana's tax framework, increased by 3% between 2019 and 2020, compared to 29% between 2018 and 2019. It is clear that government must adopt a revenue mobilization approach befitting the evolving digital age. That the E-levy was born out of a careful study of current trends in this rapidly evolving digital age and is specific on the transactions on which it will be applied. Following the presentation of the budget on November 17th and the discussions that followed, we have had extensive stakeholder engagements, including Parliament, the minority, majority, representatives of FBOs, the banks, Chamber of Telecom, AGI, Civil Society, Chamber of Commerce, and I've had smaller, intimate conversations with citizens across a few constituencies during the Christmas. I was fortunate enough to be able to visit Achim Himai, Yinem, Apapem, and our friend St. George's constituency in Pram Pram, and to just truly listen to what people feel, what people think, and the issues were quite clear to me. I did not, in those deliberations, encounter choleric response to E-levy. The issues were ones of accountability and ability for them to know what their money is going to be used for. The various concerns were heard, and we have found a way to address these concerns without an adverse fiscal impact. True to the spirit of burden sharing, the telcos have agreed to reduce their charges by 0.25%, which in effect, the impact on the 1.75 is reduced. And I think we should be clear on that, because we then retain the resources we need, but however, ensure that the citizenry is not impacted as highly. So this will reduce the overall impact, net impact of the levy on subscribers. We want to take this opportunity to thank our friends in the telecom industry, and we believe by this measure, we can then raise the requisite resources to bolster our fiscal position while keeping an eye on transaction costs and consumer welfare, and reducing the impact on the average Ghanaian, and keeping the resources required for our growth agenda. After extensive consultations, the E-levy will be resubmitted to Parliament this month, as the Minister mentioned, from the 25th of this month. We look forward to joining hands with our honourable members of Parliament to approve the E-levy on a consensus basis so that we can collectively address the big issue of unemployment, debt sustainability, and infrastructure build-up, especially roads. I think it is quite clear from the Bloomberg report and from the Fitch downgrade that the consequences of not passing the E-levy is clear to us. There's no question that we must have democracy as we have it, but even as we do, we also have to manage how it is expressed, how we work together as a people with a common goal to go forward. So, for example, our spreads have widened on the international market, such that if one were to go to the market, if there was space, you'll be paying about 500 basis points more. So for $1 billion, that will be some $50 million each year. And a 10-year bond, that is $500 million that we additionally have to pay. And so managing our democracy and Parliament is going to be important for us to speak the same language and move in a direction that does not jeopardize or compromise the needs of the Republic. And I'm sure we all can take blame for that, but we'll move forward strongly as one people to be able to get there. Let me be clear today. The E-levy would impact mobile money transfers between accounts on the same electronic money issue, EMIs, mobile money transfers from an account on one EMI to a recipient on another EMI, transfers from bank accounts to mobile money accounts, transfers from mobile money accounts to bank accounts, and bank transfers on a digital platform application which originate from a bank account belonging to an individual to another individual. I emphasize that E-levy will not impact cumulative transfers of Ghana cedis 100 per day made by the same person, transfers between accounts owned by the same person, transfer for the payment of taxes, fees, and charges on the Ghana.gov platform, electronic clearing of checks, specified merchant payments, i.e. payments to commercial establishment registered with GRA for income tax and VAT purposes, and transfers between principal, master agent, and agent's account. Let me warn, though, that if there's a deliberateness and a realization that certain migrations are being done to avoid paying of E-levy, this is again the spirit of burden sharing, and we shall invoke appropriate administrative measures during that period. Beginning tomorrow, a team comprising myself, colleague ministers, and other key members of government will embark on a public engagement and sensitization program across the country planned by the Minister of Information. We intend to communicate clearly on the proposed mechanics of the E-levy, its potential benefits to the people of Ghana within the spirit of burden sharing, and that must guide us in our development efforts as we move Ghana beyond aid. As I've indicated already, we intend to use the money to create jobs and grow our private sector to employ more of our youth, accelerate the digitalization agenda to bring more convenience to Ghanaians, enhance the security of our digital platforms, aggressively expand our road infrastructure agenda, reduce our dependence on debt, and reduce the crowding out of the private sector to improve access to credit. Ladies and gentlemen, a strong recovery needs a clear plan for the future. Initiatives such as the E-levy showcases our determination to build a stronger future our country deserves. Contrary to other assessments, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to stress that this economy will continue to get stronger. The concerns of our citizens, rating agencies, are all linked on our revenue mobilization capacity, lack of access to international markets, and our E-levy impasse. We shall overcome these. Similar to most economies, we are emerging from the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In spite of this, we do not face any imminent external imbalance. We have over 5 months import cover, which is well above our internal target of 4 months, and better than the average over the previous 2 decades. Although the current debt to GDP ratio as at the end of November 2021 is 78.4%, it reveals a reduction in the rate of debt accumulation, i.e. declined by 34% in 2020 to 18% as of November 2021. Suffice it to say that Bloomberg updated their publication that wrongly reported Ghana's debt to GDP ratio at 81.5% to reflect the correct figure as above. We are confident that all others would also realize the strength inherent in our economy, our determination as a government to implement our Obatampa program, and the need, therefore, for all of us to speak the same language to be able to move forward. We project to achieve a positive primary balance target to improve stability and reduction in the debt to GDP ratio in 2022 and through the medium term. In fact, restoring fiscal discipline and putting the public debt on a sustainable downward trajectory is a priority for government to achieve fiscal consolidation. Based on these outturns and informed projections, we start this year with renewed confidence. The government has largely met its set for itself in the past, met the targets it set for itself in the past. Stable growth, average of 5.3% between 2017 and 2020. Controlled inflation, average of 9.88% between 2017 and 2020. And a more stable currency, average depreciation of 7.5% between 2017 and 2020, and estimated 4.1% in 2021. These have been the hallmarks of our administration compared to an average GDP growth of 3.94%, average inflation of 15.9%, and average currency depreciation of 17.78% for the previous administration. We contend that we remain better managers of the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also strengthening expenditure management in 2022 and beyond to ensure that we match all expenditures to revenue inflows. All expenditure commitments in 2020 will be adjusted to match revenue collection. Therefore, in accordance with Section 20 of the Public Financial Management Act, the quarterly expenditure ceilings of the approved budget will include up to a 20% downward adjustment beginning in the first quarter of 2022 in commitments across board for all covered entities benefiting from the 2022 budget, subject to revenue performance. This means that our fiscal consolidation addenda is not going to be only revenue-led, but also expenditure-focused. In addition to the E-levy, we are committed to the implementation of other revenue measures, including the exemption bill, property taxes, internally generated funds, etc. I look forward to further engaging with you all in the coming days and sharing government's vision for creating a country where ingenuity is encouraged, where innovation is supported, where public service is valued, where responsibility and burden sharing is for all of us and prosperity will be shared. Accountability for the custodianship of public resources would also be prioritized. We have, in the spirit of burden sharing and consultations, as I mentioned, gotten 25% off the fees of the commercial operators. This is in good faith, so let us keep 1.75% to build our country. The opportunity to build a resilient, more dynamic and prosperous society lies ahead of us. We must all seize the moment to build forward better and a wealthier society. Genesis 11:5 and 6 says, "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. And the Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." Let us speak the same language for the Republic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. God bless our country.
Minister, thank you for that presentation. Colleagues, we're going to move straight ahead into the Q&A session. I will take up to three rounds of questions, each of not more than 5 persons, and for each person, please do not go beyond 2 questions so that your other colleagues can also have an opportunity to ask their own questions. Minister has spoken to about 7 major things at this press briefing. One, he's reiterated the policy areas of the 2022 budget, dealing with the debt issue, that is increasing resource mobilization and prudent expenditure management. He's talking about jobs, job creation and skills development. He's talked about the infrastructure conversation that we're having in this country. It's all part of the areas that are focused in this budget. He's also spoken about the already manifesting rapid post-pandemic economic recovery. And he's taken time to outline numbers, as have been put out already by the Ghana Statistical Service, showing that already the recovery in a very rapid way is happening. He also went back to talk about the COVID-related interventions, which is what stretched our public finances, but also contributed to the world-acclaimed COVID response program of Ghana and the results that we got from time. At the same time, while we were doing that, we were also keeping our flagship programs. And then he spoke about the most efficient way to broaden the tax base, the E-levy, its scope, and the uses of those funds, and the commitment to accountability, etc., within the E-levy basket. So our questions will fall within this area. As I mentioned, up to 3 rounds of questions, 5 persons each, and I encourage you to do not more than 2 questions per head so that other colleagues can go up. Where's the microphone? On that side. So, okay, we'll be biased towards the ladies first. So take the 2 ladies. Minister, you are looking for the ladies, so take the... Yeah, good way to start the year. So we'll start with the ladies. 1, 2.
I'm Nettle Neti from City TV. Minister, please, I'd like to ask, is government going to make any concessions to ensure the E-levy is passed? And what will be the impact if there are any further delays with its passage?
My name is Ekuya Dumadankwa. I work with Home Base TV. I'm also their parliamentary correspondent. Minister, please, you mentioned that you've had broader consultation with stakeholders and Ghanaians as a whole. Would that cause some changes in the E-levy bill before you resubmit it to Parliament this month? And my second question is, you stated that we should maintain the 1.75%. Does that mean that the call for the minority in Parliament to, if not scrapped at all, reduce the 1.75 has not been heard? And if that is true, you also mentioned that you've had conversations with both the minority and the majority side in Parliament. Have they accepted that the 1.75 still stands, so that when we resume on 25th, it wouldn't cause any scrabbles like we experienced before Parliament went on break?
Gentleman there, yeah?
Yes, I'm Kenneth from Metro TV. When the Honorable Minister was speaking, he compared the inflation rate from 2016 and then 2021. But in 2021, the inflation rate for 6 months kept on increasing. We started the year with a single figure, we ended with double figures. What is the ministry going to do to ensure that we do not keep on having our inflation rate increase? And then one of the leading things that led to the increase in inflation were water, housing, and food. So what is the ministry going to do to ensure that at least the inflation rate is brought to single figure? Again, the Honorable Minister also centered a lot of the conversation around E-levy. I'd like to find out if E-levy is going to solve all our problems. And again, how much are we going to generate from E-levy? Let's assume that we've passed E-levy this year. How much at the end of the year are we going to generate from E-levy? And how is it going to help solve the numerous problems Honorable mentioned, including unemployment? Thank you.
So the E-levy targets are in the fiscal framework, already also outlined in the budget, about 7 billion. So that's a matter of public record, 7 to 8 billion. It's a matter of public record. Also, we have not said that E-levy will solve all our problems. So I think the foundation of that question needs to be quickly dealt with. E-levy is one of the revenue measures, as part of several revenue measures, aimed at raising the resources that we need for the appropriation of about 145 billion. So it's important to put that in context even before we get into answers. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. My name is Ernest Kofiedu of Deleguys. One of the criticisms against the E-levy is that it is targeting capital, people's capital, instead of incomes earned. I want the Minister to speak to that for me to understand.
Yes, sir. We'll take a final question.
Okay, my name is Emmanuel Bruce from Graphic. I just want some clarity. The Minister mentioned that the telcos had agreed to review their charges by 0.25%, downwards by 0. And then, but we know the E-levy was supposed to be charged on when you are sending, and then transactions that are beyond 100 cedi. But then we know the telcos, they are 1%. It affects both sending and receiving, and it doesn't matter the amount you are sending. So I want to find out if the review of the 0.25% affects all the telcos, every transaction you do with the telcos, or just when you are doing a transaction that involves the charges, the E-levy charges.
Thank you. So we'll take reactions to this first set of questions. We'll have two more questions. Minister, I just want to quickly go over the questions that have been raised. The first set of questions were on whether or not, in addition to some of the earlier amendments that were made to the initial proposal on the E-levy, because if you read the budget, if you listen to the minister's presentation, and if you compare it to the E-levy bill that is now before Parliament, you notice that some things have already been taken out. So the question is, in addition to the amendments that have been made, capital. Correct? Yes. And then a final question: how do we align the cuts of the telcos to the scope of the E-levy? So, Honorable Minister, we are in your hands.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. And with regards to further concessions, as the Minister said, we really are the plenary. And of course, the impact in delay, will be obvious to all of us because we've got 12 months in a year. And as I have mentioned before, a 0.25 reduction leads to almost 1 billion cedis of impact that will have. Will there be changes? I think part of, my going around to see some of these constituencies and this engagement with you is really looking to stress the fact that, yes, indeed, we have consulted, we have worked with the telcos to find a way in which to reduce the impact to the consumer, and therefore, given the resource needs for debt, for infrastructure, especially roads, and for employment, this has been a way to secure the fiscal resources that will require, whilst at the same time finding a way for the impact to be reduced through the telcos. So we have answered that question as to the reduction in impact, at the same time being able to maintain the resource envelope required to take us where we want to go. I think Minister answered most of Ken's questions and the need for us to read the public information on some of these issues. It's certainly, there's no silver bullet in any way, in any solution that we all come up with. But I think that the particular issue that will be achieved is that the tax handles are changing. E-commerce is becoming dominant, and the sooner we get into it, the better for us. That's one. Secondly, the complaint about the lack of inclusiveness and everybody paying, this certainly brings everybody in there to ensure that we all participate in nation building. And I think that's important. And I think morally also, once you pay taxes, you exert your democratic rights a little bit more. And hopefully that will help support in the assemblies in the way in which they do things, because Kojo Kwame is paying his taxes and he will demand accountability. And so those are very important sociological switches, and that will help us in the way going forward. So thank you for that question. With regards to the issue of capital and income, it sounds really very sophisticated, but truly what are we saying? We're saying that there's a service which is convenient to you, and to who use the service in a day, pay me something little. That's what we are saying. And the transfers to people mostly, are not capital related. It's me sending somebody some money for a funeral or to support them to do something. So I think those, and that's what I reference, the issue of the rich and the middle class. Throwing these issues, in my mind, as if protecting the poorer people. But I look at the statistics, and they are not paying their part of the bill. So let's be upfront about where we're going, the need that we have to build on our I think those will address.
Minister, thank you. We'll go to a second batch of questions. I don't see any ladies, so I'll go straight to the gentleman. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'll keep you 2 for the final batch. So you're the first 2 in the final batch. So let's start this time from here. There was the first hand here? Was there first hand here? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Maxwell Adumbila from Graphic. Minister, the last time we met here, one of the concerns I in particular raised was the discrepancies, the disruption in passing the E-levy and the impact it had on our fiscal situation, the confidence issue and all that. And we've seen that spill over. We've seen that magnify itself in January. We appear to have been in the same space again, because the difficulty in accepting or rejecting the E-levy has to do more in Parliament. The minorities' insistence that they don't want it. The majority's insistence that it must pass through. And over here, I thought maybe we would have reached a consensus where Minister is coming to say, okay, we've spoken to the minority and they've agreed that this is the way forward. But I don't see that clearly from Minister.
So what's your question?
So my question is, what is Minister's discussion with the minority? What is the position as it is now?
He's just explained the position.
The consultations are ongoing, or they've concluded, and the agreement is that it will be accepted. That's what
Let me just be clear. This is not the kind of thing where you are necessarily haggling with another party to reach an agreement over. Government policy, government fiscal economic policy is such that the executive makes a proposal, we go to Parliament, we have a debate, and when we finish with that debate, we cast a vote for those who agree and those who disagree. You can have engagements behind the scenes to try and get understanding, and I think that's a lot that has happened so far. And Minister has explained what has been done so far in a bid to achieve that understanding. I'm not sure you're asking that we sidestep that process and try and get an agreement with somebody on the side. So what remains now is that you go back into the chamber, you put it on the table, and then you go through the processes.
Okay, so I think my concern is clear. The impact on the confidence, and then that
impact on confidence. So, Minister, I'll get a reaction from you on impact on confidence.
And that leads me to the next question. Minister mentioned that we are not facing imminent external risks.
Yeah.
But one of the issues raised by Fitch was that we have our outlook is negative.
Yeah.
And that has issues to do with medium to long-term financing of our obligations.
Yep.
From Minister's perspective, what is a policy direction to regain that confidence and open the market for us, given the impact of our reliance on domestic borrowing on the growth of the economy that Minister mentioned?
Thank you. Minister, so what is your comment on what we are doing to regain that confidence that we can meet our medium to long-term obligations, looking at the various levels of our fiscal position currently? Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Issa Mohammed with the Ghana News Agency. Managing our debt situation, and especially at a time when you have E-levy coming on, there have been concerns regarding capping government's borrowing. Is this something that's on your table as we speak now?
Are we considering a debt ceiling in Ghana?
Yes.
Okay. So is the executive branch considering a debt ceiling in Ghana? That's a question. Yes, sir.
My name is Kweku Asante, Joy FM. I want to ask, is government or is Ghana broke? And if that is not so, why do there seem to be this insistence on what some have said, pushing through the E-levy, which will bring in less than 10% of the total expected revenue that government expected as was presented in the budget? And also when some analysts have warned that even that amount that have been quoted, around 8 billion, is overly ambitious and will be lucky to even get 3 billion at the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Minister, I mean, what's a big deal of, or about 10% of the revenue basket? I mean, if it's just 10%, how big a deal is it? What's a big deal of 10% to the entire revenue basket? And secondly, what do you make about the fact that even that assessment of about 7 billion is too ambitious? Quick, that's the second question, correct? Yeah. Thank you. Let's go.
Hi, my name is Obed. I report for GH1 TV. So at the tail end of Minister's presentation, you mentioned that other revenue mobilization measures will be introduced. I want to get a response from you. What are the specific revenue mobilization measures he's talking about? Because already Ghanaians are having issues with E-levy. Thank you.
You mean apart from the ones, because I'm sure he's referring to the other ones in the budget. All of the ones that have been outlined in the budget. Yeah, they are there already.
Thank you very much. The name is Justice Adoboy. Okay, some of the issues I have heard from the public on the E-levy, fundamental to many of our major government policies, whether it is interventions or revenue, which says that these are not targeted at all. And so whether it is subsidies, it subsidizes both the rich and the poor. And whether it is revenue, both the rich and the poor are affected. And so the question I hear from the public is, why is government not sharing the, how do you call it, the percentages charged by the telcos on the mobile money transactions, rather than charging everybody across the board?
Come again with that question. Why is government not sharing?
Yeah, sharing that 1% that the telcos, charges when we do the mobile money transactions. Why is government not sharing that with the telcos, rather than charging everybody?
Why is government not taking a share of the telcos' revenue as a way of mobilizing? Rather than imposing a levy on the originators of the transaction.
Exactly.
Very well.
That is the question I hear from the public.
Very well. Very well.
Now, my second question is, what is your plan B in case the impasse we saw in Parliament last year remains? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for this. I think the first one is on the issue of the impact on confidence, and that's really a very important question, because we have seen what the international capital market is reacting to, the scene, that engagement that we went through Parliament with, leading to our spreads in the bond market, going, I guess, north of 1,000 basis points, which I indicated that it sort of freezes you, in a sense, out of the market, or you go in at a price that becomes quite ridiculous for us. So, for example, as I mentioned, $1 billion bond of 500 more basis points, 50 million a year, 10-year instrument, 500 billion. So those are the costs of democracy if we don't manage it well. And that's what leads to the confidence issue. I think for this year, we were quite clear that with regards to our SDRs, which we have, which we may use about 3/4 of a 750 million, that will help bridge the gap and then find a more innovative way of doing the balance of 750 towards the latter end of the year. So we will be able to manage the issue of entry or non-entry into the international markets. And sometimes, taking some rest for these markets may not be a bad thing. But I think what this illustrates the need for us to be circumspect about the level of altercations that may happen and how we manage our hang parliament in a way that puts the republic first. So that's a learning for all of us. Market out there is quite cruel, and we are seeing it. And I think that will lead in terms of how we manage ourselves, both from the majority and minority part, in terms of seeking some alignment in the way in which we approach things, which is very Ghanaian, and it's good for us to remember our sociology, to come back to that. With regards to managing, debt ceilings, we have the Fiscal Responsibility Act about, remaining, sort of having a positive primary balance, and also ensuring that the deficit remains under 5%. Because truly, as your GDP grows, your capacity to absorb more debt is higher, and your capacity, if you have the tax handles to increase your revenue, is also stronger, and therefore, and also your ability to manage your expenditure. So those are all sort of moving variables, and therefore capping debt is not sort of a very scientific way to get things done. Mr. Sante also delved into the heart of the matter. 7 billion CDs with regards to E-levy, which may be under 10% of the 80 billion that we expect from GRA, and maybe 5% of the 145 billion that we have for the budget. So what does it mean? But I would say do not despise small beginnings. And as the world changes into an e-commerce economy, it's better for us to begin to understand, how that moves rather than later. But I think the issue of also the inclusiveness of everybody participating is a very important psychological hurdle for all of us, and it deepens our democracy. When I pay, I can shout more with the moral strength that it comes with. And that then hopefully will improve governance and ensure that transactions are done more. The issue of only the politician being the protector of the purse is an erroneous way to run any government. The issue of citizens being also protectors of the purse is important. And it is when you pay that you care. So those become then existential issues that we as a nation should have a conversation on. So it goes beyond the numbers, Mr. Sante, and that's important. And really, any little money is important, so it's not like, well, what's the big deal about that? And I think maybe in us going around and beginning to talk about it, the real issues may come of how do you account for this money that you are collecting? Will there be a quarterly report to Parliament? Will there be a way in which I can see an E-levy building? Those sort of transparent, accountable things. And this is all progress in governance and democracy. And the way in which this has been charged, my expectation, as Minister mentioned, is that when we go to plenary, and those are kind of the issues we may debate on, to say, okay, clearly we can't continue to have this level of unemployment. Clearly we can't continue to have this unsustainable debt. Clearly we need to build our infrastructure. So I understand why it should be 1.75, and you have been able to talk to the telcos to reduce the impact, so that has been achieved. Now, what do we require to ensure that we collect this money, use it appropriately, without any opacity, but a lot more transparency? And that's what I'm expecting, and that's why in November, when I went to Parliament, I sought audience to be able to do that. And then we sort of all got derailed. But we are back. They've had some rest. I've been around myself. And these issues, as I'm putting in front of you, will then be areas of contention. There's no way you can have, sort of an absolute agreement. But I think once we accept the need and see that we have been empathetic to the views and found a way to reduce it, now let us see how we ensure that you apply it in a way that the citizens of Ghana will come to support it. So we look forward to that engagement. Other revenue measures, as Minister mentioned, property taxes and the issues of tax exemptions, etc., are all areas that we have to look at and block the leakages. Plan B. I think the nation would come around to this. And so I'm very confident. But as we mentioned, we also looked at the issue of, we are going up by 40% with regards to revenue mobilization, and then expenditure is also going up by 25% or so. And we've always been very good about being able to cut down expenditure appropriately when we don't meet our targets. Now, this new dawn of GRA meeting its targets, we expect that to continue. With the new national ID system, where now 15.5 million people are going to be on their books, we expect that increase in escalation to be sustained. So yes, we'll push on the revenue mobilization, and also, as we mentioned, even up to 20% on managing our expenditures will be something that we invoke. And that's what gives me the excitement about the future, because when I read the Fitch report, they are doubting that we can make our revenues, and I'm confident that we can. They are worried that we can't come to international markets, and I'm saying that's fine. We have our SDRs of 750, and that will suffice for the first half, and then we'll figure out another method of getting there 750 without going to the market. And maybe the market needs to rest a bit so that the investors build the confidence and see where we are going. So Plan B is to stay focused, and ensure that we get our E-levy through, ensure that our domestic revenue mobilization is strong, and that B, we do not need to go to the market immediately. And so thank you.
Thank you. On a lighter note, I recall an old incident where somebody was asked, what's Plan B? He says, Plan B is to go back to Plan A. We'll come back for the final batch of questions. But before then, just a few quick comments. A question about chaos in Parliament and how it can translate into a breakdown in confidence on the global market. I think, colleagues, you have to help us speak some truth to ourselves. Chaos is not a way of resolving disagreements. There's nothing wrong with parliamentarians disagreeing on a particular measure on the table. The rules say that when we disagree, we debate to try and convince one another. We can have conversations, engagements like Minister has done throughout, and then when we finish, we subject it to a vote. In this country, on the 7th of December every 4 years, prior to that, we may disagree on who should be president, but we don't fight about it as a republic. We allow people to campaign and debate, and in the end, we all queue up nicely and vote, and they count and they take a decision that where the majority went is where Ghana wants to go. That way, chaos does not ensue. The international markets and everybody else looks at us as a civilized, matured republic. It's the same thing we have to do in Parliament. So there's nothing wrong even with a disagreement on it. There have been various disagreements in times past. One side may say, I don't agree, I'm going to walk out. I don't agree, I'm going to abstain. I don't agree, I'm going to vote against it. But to begin to physically obstruct the process is something that all of us collectively must speak against. And it's not about will you go and beg them or will you negotiate or no. We must speak the truth that physically obstructing the process. Imagine somebody going to physically obstruct voting on election day in this country. We will all agree that that is not the right thing to do. And it is the same spirit we must bring to bear on this one. So there's nothing wrong even with disagreeing, but we must commit ourselves to go through a civil, matured process for resolving that disagreement. And that's a message that across the divide, across media, across political party lines, we must all agree on. Number two, the question of the 10%, Minister has outlined it. I just wanted to throw something a little bit in it. Appropriation is 145 billion. Minister wishes that he could spend more, and this is 25% of an increase in terms of what he spent on behalf of government last year. He wishes he could spend more to do more of what all of us are asking for. The problem is that he's only limited by a 40% increase in revenue, and at the same time bringing the debt we are complaining down by reducing the deficit to about 7.9 or so. 7.4 or so. So if we all agree that we would like to see a lot more, it's not so much about, oh, give away 10%. You give away 10%, the reality is that then you have to even reduce from 145 downwards. But actually, we all are thinking that we should be able to do more for our people. So the question is, how do we even get 10, 15, 20, 25, 30% more into the revenue basket so that we can do more? Just wanted to add those for context. Final batch of questions, last 5, and then we'll go. GTV, ABC. You've spoken already, have you? You haven't, okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'll give the last word to Bloomberg, so that you don't scare the world again with any of your publications. If you need any clarification, I'll give you the last word. So yeah, let's start from there.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. In the budget, we've been told that the Minister will be seeking to raise 37 billion cedis on the financial markets. With the more or less closure, we're going to raise 100 billion. We are going to expend 145. So we have a deficit or a shortfall in terms of revenue of about 45. The initial document suggests that we raise about 37. Is that correct? You seem
7 is a total deficit.
So we are raising 27 on the domestic market, we've been told.
You ask your question and
so
then
I want to know the impact of this on access to credits to the private sector on the local market, because that certainly may result
so
into
the
crowding out.
What is the impact of our borrowing program on access to credit on the local
especially
market?
when it focuses on the domestic market for now?
Yeah. So what's the impact of government's financing program, the domestic side, on access to credit, particularly for the private sector? Do I get you right?
Yes, that's the first question. The second question is also on the fiscal consolidation. We are seeing a lot on the revenue side, E-levy, increase of government services, and so on. For the first time, I've heard from Minister talking about some 20% with state entities benefiting from the budgets, which has been tied to how much government has received in terms of revenue and those stuff. What are we going to do more in terms of cutting wastage in the system so that we ensure that in as much as we want to spend more, in as much as revenue is not performing, we are also doing something to reduce wastage so that together we can have some fiscal space to carry on with government programs. Thank you.
Thank you. So you want some more detail on the expenditure containment measures? Some more details on the expenditure containment measures. Yeah, ABC.
So my question is about the commentary around by some experts. So the commentary around is that the economy is distressed to the extent that something drastic needs to be done. So one of the proposals is that the possibility of going back to the fund for support. So I want to know if the minister share in these sentiments and is going back to the fund an option to government. Thank you.
Very much. Minister, what do you think about requirements or recommendations that you should go for a bailout program? What do you think about those suggestions that you should go for a bailout program?
Okay, so Minister, my question is Ghana broke?
Okay, I hear you are reiterating Kweku's question. I saw him sharing the question with you. But I think Minister has asked, or that has been answered already. It's been asked and answered. Yes, we'll go. Is there another question here? Yes.
Okay, so Kingsley Ghanaian Times. So as part of the revenue mobilization drive, some experts believe the mining sector could have been an avenue for government to raise additional revenue. So my question is, going forward, probably in the media budget review, are you going to see some measures to raise more revenue from the mining sector, given that because of COVID, the mining sector or gold became a safe haven for people to invest? So are you going to see measures to raise more revenue from the sector? Secondly, is the E-levy not a defeat to our cash light or financial inclusion strategy? Because assuming I earn 200 and the person could have paid me through Momo, but now I'm going to pay 1.5. Maybe I may decide to take 1.75. I may decide to take it physically instead of the person sending it to me through.
That's a 1.75 of the 200 cedis.
Yes, because if I decide to take the money through Momo, then it means I'm going to pay 1.75, which I can also take it through physically. So that's my second question.
Okay. So just on that hypothetical, if it's 200 cedis, the first 100 cedis is free. So it's 1.75 on the second 100 cedis, which is 1.75 cedis. Just to do that. Yeah. Which one was that?
Asking why government was not share in the telco's revenue.
Very well. Very well. Where's that? I call. Yes, final one.
Let's see. Thank you, Minister, for the opportunity. Minister, what other avenues are you looking at to still raise funding from some external source of sort, given it is good dollar and slightly cheaper? And you're also talking about giving the international markets a rest. How do you try to raise money, be it external or any form? And you had also said that you had put together syndicated loans and bilateral trades agreements, so to say, to also raise funding. Any timelines on that? I know you would want to have your Eurobonds very early. Therefore, any timelines on those bilateral trades and agreements and syndications that you are thinking about? And pardon me to also have a bite of E-levy. My salary is sent down and then it comes into my account. In the spirit of digitization, I transfer it into my Momo and you charge me 1.75. So then I said, okay, then let me send my wife money for housekeeping money. You charge me 1.75. Then I said, let me pay my child's school fees via Momo. You charge me 1.75. My wife goes out there to buy maybe fuel, so let me pay by the same Momo. You charge me 1.75. Minister, is this not regressive? And are you not deformalizing the economy you've been seeking to formalize? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for the conversation. I think that the question really, I mean, when I go to the US now, you know, you're using cash less and less as the whole economy becomes e-commerce, and it's just convenient. Now, whether as the gentleman said, he would take his 200 cedis and walk to get to Circle and give the money to somebody to take it. I'm sure after a while he realized the 1.75 cedis he pays for the 100 cedis, it may be worth it. You know, so I think it's going to be an issue of adjustment. And truly, nobody really likes paying taxes. And the more it comes closer to you paying something, the less you're enamored by it. But where are we as a nation, and where truly are we going? And are we going to be able to afford the life that we are leading without contributing to it? I think those become the essential questions of play. Friends in Sweden pay 55% of their income, you know, to government. And we go there and, you know, and so say, and that we are very quiet about, you know. But I think the underlying issue is because you know you'll be caught and you'll be punished. So these existential questions about this and this do not even come in. And I think that's where we need to move towards. So those are sort of natural questions about efficiencies, etc. Until you just get used to it, it becomes a way of life. Your gutter is cleaned, your children are in safer places, and we move on. So we do appreciate all of that, and you know, the plethora of ways in which calls wife and grandmother and whatever will be paying on the 1.75. But if you spend your money, there's a gift tax. You know, you have earned your income, you've paid all your taxes, you leave the inheritance. There's a gift tax on it. The same money, you know. So I think it's an adjustment process that we all are going to have to go through going forward. With regards to the issue of some 37 billion or so that we have to deal with, and then the 28.9 billion of domestic financing that we have to do, and what is therefore the impact on access to credit, are things that we have to manage. As we talked about the U-Start program and the burden sharing and what agreements we've come to with the banks. It's an interesting one, for example, where they've committed 5 billion to support SME financing. And we as a government need to look at it like what we've done with GESEL, where agri financing is somewhat subsidized, to see how we facilitate those resources to support industrial production. So it is going to require some innovativeness to thinking to ensure that the growth that we're experiencing, which really undergirds where the economy is going to be what we'll be doing during the year. I think the issue of expenditure wastage is a very serious issue, and therefore we are, the past 3 weeks, been examining the financing of roads, for example, where you see certain overlaps that should not occur, the cost per kilometer, how to manage that, what type of committee do you set in place to inspect before these IPCs come, etc., to eliminate the interest charges and all of that. And I think that's a serious business, and how we also intend not to spend beyond the revenue are going to be critical interventions in the years that are ahead. I think if you look at this COVID period, literally all of Africa moved up by 10 percentage points from some average of 63 to 73% in their debt to in their revenue to GDP ratios. So that the continent is truly under duress. And the question then becomes, for countries such as Ghana, with a diversity of ways to get income in terms of our own productive capacity, and then the minerals area, which the gentleman mentioned. So we have a little bit more flexibility than most. And the question really of working capital to be able to do our work really hinges on our thoroughness in making sure that these avenues of revenue, are well monitored, and we get the resources that we want. So yes, in any enterprise, you have challenges during certain periods, and then you see the green shoots that are happening with your institutions now beginning to perform, and therefore your ability using your domestic market to close the gap and increase productivity such that you'll be able to pay your way. And when you begin to see a 6.2% increase in productivity compared to 3.7 for Sub-Sahara, 3.6 for ECOWAS, you get confident that you'll be able to, in the end, cover the resource needs that are required. And if you are mindful of your expenditure, then the tension also reduces. The mining sector issue is real. The revenue assurance and compliance group is working specifically on the mining sector to make sure we get our due return from those places. So I think we will get the resources to support the agenda this year and the following year. I'm confident about what we'll put in place to ensure that. I'm not sure that I mentioned that I was in discussions with any bilateral people or something, and syndication. I just said really that for SDRs we should be able to manage the first half of the year and then get innovative about how we find other resources for the second half to bridge that. Given the wideness of the spread, I think most people would advise that you don't go to the market at this point in time. I think that's natural. Whether we're coming or not, we wouldn't be looking to do that soon. So that's where we are, and thanks for your article. I guess it set us all thinking, and you were gracious enough to make the correction. That's good, but I think it also puts the country in a clear awareness that the way in which we manage our democracy is important. Certainly the debate, as Minister said, should occur, but within the rules in such a way that is orderly as we go forward. So truly, truly, to thank you for your patience, for being here, and let's see how we take a really positive spin to the experiences of last year, so that the Republic will be speaking one language with you and ensure that the issues of debt, the issues of infrastructure, and the issues of employment will be something that will resolve through positively passing the E-levy and charting a course in which we all speak one language. Thank you.
Honourable Minister, I want to say a big thank you for your time and for taking us through these issues. Colleagues, we also want to take a moment to appreciate your patience. And I noticed that many of you have been carrying this press briefing live. We're very, very grateful to you for carrying us live and for enabling the nation to hear the Honourable Minister. As he mentioned, in the coming days, you see a lot more of senior government officials reaching out and responding to your questions, particularly about questions on the economy across the country. So please be on the lookout for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would have one of our directors pray us out before we all go and thank the Lord for this.
Evening.